what a weekend. The college football landscape is getting closer and closer to the NFL because of NIL. The transfer portal, really, the NFL doesn't have that. You just can't go anywhere for free. But because of the money involved, the separation itself, and yet what makes that league so good is the parity. You never know who might go 8-9 one year and 14-3 the next. David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak. And this is where, is this going to be the exception weekend once or twice a year, or is this where we're headed, where college football has very little separation other than what you hear about ratings and attendance and also revenue?
I think this is where we're headed. Now, some conferences in particular will be able to withstand it more than others, but you're going to see peaks and valleys. It's going to be like professional sports. You're going to have a lot of years where you say, my team was good. What happened this year? Well, when free agency comes to things, it creates chaos, and chaos then leads to more parity. Look, I mean, dynasties happen in the NFL. The Chiefs are in one right now. The Patriots had one, but there was a stretch there where, like, outside of the Patriots, it was kind of other people winning Super Bowls. And you'll see that, I think, in college football a lot more now because you're adding games. You add games into a playoff that's more chances to lose. You add games into a playoff that also gives you opportunities to lose in the early season and it not affect you as much. So I think this is going to be more the norm as things go on.
Yeah, I think it might be the norm. I mean, we'll see. I definitely think there's going to be more parity nowadays than there's not because there's abilities for schools that otherwise wouldn't get big players to have the ability to do that, to go get a Diego Pavia and give Vanderbilt a chance to knock off Alabama, although it took obviously much more than just him. And there's examples all over some of the games this weekend of teams that have benefited from the portal or benefited from NIL and put themselves in a better position to win as a result of that. But I also think, like, it's not like we were chaos-free previously. There's always a weekend or two every year where there's a lot of chaos. So this is that weekend, and we'll see how many more are out there. But I think it's a sprinkling of both, and I just can't help but be reminded by all the people that wanted to just have no playoff, and especially no expanded playoff. What a genius idea when we enter an era of potential parity to give teams that might be on more equal footing than ever before less opportunity. I understand it messes with the precious. Like, these teams aren't undefeated playing each other because that's how I grew up watching college football, is you have to be immaculate to be. Why? The Super Bowl champ is hardly ever. But like, we grew up where you had to be perfect or you had to lose one game. And so everybody's brains are hardwired to think like that's the way it's supposed to be. And shoot, I think this is a way better way is to, if we're going to have parity, have, I don't know, a team that, has 3 losses in the playoff that might beat that team that's undefeated or have 1 loss. And, why you wouldn't want to potentially see that, because you might have to watch a blowout for a couple of hours. Like, I feel like the whole let's not expand the playoff argument is getting blown to smithereens by weekends like this. And, in fact, it goes to show you that this is, in my opinion, going to be a better path to determining a champion. Yes, it might include some teams that have more losses than normal, but who cares? Why do we care about that? Why do we worry about that? So, bring on the upsets, bring on the parity, and bring on the madness, and we got a little bit of all that this weekend.
I think that if the more teams that feel like that they don't have to be perfect can have a chance to win if you get hot at the right time, I don't have any problem with the team with 3 losses or whatever it might be getting in. You want who's the best team at the end of the year. And then again, you could also, if you're the college football playoff committee, kind of create that yourself based on what you think of a team who's hot or not. Here are some stats from the weekend of Vanderbilt beating Alabama. And then, of course, there was Arkansas beating what we saw in Tennessee and other games along the way. For the first time in SEC history, 2 AP top 5 teams, Alabama and Tennessee, lost on the same day to unranked teams. 3 top 10 SEC teams lost on the same day for the first time, even earlier than that, since October of 2006. And yet, despite 3 teams in the top 10 losing, Alabama, Tennessee, and Missouri, we will get to the top 25 because still the same number of teams in the SEC are a part of it. In fact, I think they have 1 extra team from the SEC that's a part of the top 25, despite what was that unbelievable year that we have not seen in a long, long time. Top 10 teams losing to unranked teams. In the first 6 weeks of the season, 9 Top 10 teams have now lost to unranked opponents in the first 6 weeks. 9 have now been beaten who were top 10 teams against not a 25 team, unranked teams this year.
It echoes the sentiment I think that we all have about early season rankings being pointless. Mm-hmm. I mean, is FSU a top 10 team? Is Missouri really? I mean, what have you done to be in the top 10 the first month of the season? What has anybody done to be ranked anyway before we've played more than 3 or 4 games?
Man, we got to put some power on those recruiting rankings.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what they're going off of.
Yeah.
NIL rankings based on just a bunch of people like us sitting around and a formula here and there that they created that, nobody knows the details of. But beyond that, that's what we're going off of. And last year's fumes is basically what it is. Those are more unscientific than ever, given that there's the transfer portal, in my opinion. It's not the same team carrying over from year to year. And the case of Oklahoma State, that doesn't even mean anything good necessarily. That might not be a good thing that it's carrying over en masse. So, I think there's a place for preseason rankings for television purposes. Beyond that, I think it's a complete crapshoot that normally has a lot of biases baked into it. And how that continues in the future, I don't know. It's such a big talking point every week. They're never going to go away, but I do think those early ones are more suspect than they've ever been before.
Yeah, Missouri had beaten Vanderbilt, remember, just the week before or so by 3. Also beat what was Boston College. I think at the time they were ranked in the top 25, but they got smoked by A&M. Here's some history, and we'll get to that too with the Aggies and Mike Elko. The last Vanderbilt win against Alabama, period, was 1984. That year, Alabama was 5-6. The last Vanderbilt win against Alabama was in Nashville at home, 1969. Alabama was 6-5 that year. Last time Vanderbilt scored 40 points or more against Alabama, you have to go back to 1907, 78-0, when Vanderbilt statistically may have been one of the best teams in the history of the game. AP number 1 teams had gone 134-1 against unranked teams since 2008. Oregon State beat USC the year before. Oregon State, they were unranked, had won 9 games. And Vanderbilt, 0-60 prior to Saturday at home against AP top 5 teams. By the way, not many teams have winning records against the AP top 5, but they were winless at 0-60.
Yeah, it was a remarkable game. I couldn't believe what I was watching the whole time. I thought at any moment that, Alabama was going to just quash it, and they never did. They never did. They just Vanderbilt kept coming and coming and coming, and Diego Pavia is just a really fun player to watch. I love him. I loved him at New Mexico. The fact that Vanderbilt was kind of able to sneak him through the portal like they were by hiring his offensive coordinator, and that's where he went. He wanted to go in the SEC. There was only one SEC school that offered him, and he went to Vanderbilt because his offensive coordinator went there. And, Clark Lee looks like a genius.
Yeah, he was a really talented player previously. I know a lot of people are probably pretending to know what he was in New Mexico, but I saw him quite a bit combing through the Earl Campbell Award stuff every week, and he was always a player that you stop down on and go like, wait a second, who's this guy? And just saw him more and more and more, and yeah, he's a barrel of entertainment, sometimes for worse, but there's the high hit and high entertainment factor that comes with that young man, and certainly that was on full display during the course of that game, and then even in the post-game interview as well. I wasn't aware of his Johnny Manziel boyhood dream, watching Manziel beat Alabama and how that played into Saturday's game. I thought that was a great job by the broadcast crew to bring that to the forefront of the entire story, and to see that all come full circle was a really neat moment. And obviously he's gone viral, and he's the talk of Vanderbilt and really of college football this weekend. But a young man who's had a very interesting history, interesting road to get to where he got on Saturday, but has always been a high entertainment type of a player when he's at his best, and that was certainly what the country saw on Saturday. So very cool, and obviously a great job by Vanderbilt to bring him into the fold, because it completely changed what that team otherwise would have been.
All right, so Vanderbilt is going to take things from Saturday night's win, including the goalpost, and they're having an auction. And part of that money will go to pay Alabama $100,000 because if you storm the field, you pay the opponent who was on the field. It doesn't even go to charity or the SEC. Pieces of the goalpost, a Clark Lee autographed game helmet, game balls, the end zone game pylons. Everything must go. Vanderbilt selling a piece of history Saturday night to bring in some cash.
Yeah, might as well. I mean, it's the biggest win in the history of Vanderbilt football, and I mean, who knows when they're going to have something that's going to top this? Like, I mean, given their history, like it could be another 40 years before something tops this. So, because of that, now look, Clark Lee said that when he took the job, he fully expected Vanderbilt to be the best program in the country. And everybody was like, well, that's what you say when you take a job. But they have their first gigantic – I mean, this is gigantic for them. Biggest win in program history, no doubt about it. So you got to run the victory lap while you can because if you're Vanderbilt, you know, like the other shoe can drop real fast.
Well, it'd be stupid to not do something to fundraise.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't think this is any surprise whatsoever. That's what most teams would do, even if it hadn't been a win to begin with. It's the Monday routines. Go ask for money, right? For colleges, basically. So, I appreciate the fact that they're at least giving you something in return, like selling items off, you know, instead of just saying like, hey, now's a great time to donate to the collective. Like, at least they're giving you something for that other than assurances your money will go to pay Diego Pavia or whatever. But, yeah, they need to take full advantage of this moment in the spotlight, and maybe it's a longer than a moment in the spotlight for Vanderbilt. That'll remain to be seen, but it was an incredible win. It was unbelievable to watch unfold, and it was an incredible roller coaster ride of emotions to watch them try to handle that all in the second half especially, and then to actually do it was just amazing. It was completely unforeseen, and especially with Alabama playing pretty good ball up to this point, I don't think anybody, no matter how much you thought Vanderbilt had improved, would have predicted that result on Saturday. So it's funny to see like their makeshift stadium, you know, under construction as a background to all of that, and to see the crowd have that type of moment that they've never had in, you know, most of the history of that entire school was all just very cool, very surreal to still even really be talking about it. But my only question is now, like, who's the dumpster team? Like, you can't say, like, oh, Vanderbilt, like, oh, sorry-ass Vanderbilt, or, you know, they don't belong in the SEC or whatever people have said about them, or, you know, how you dunked on them just by default because, hey, why not? They're Vanderbilt. They've been Vanderbilt for so long. They're that default team that does not belong with all of the big names in the SEC. So now that they've done this, they can't be that team anymore. They get a reprieve from that for at least a good while. So I don't know who that team in college football is now, but it's not Vanderbilt anymore.
No, we used to always, like, say that. You know, it's almost like for the longest time Northwestern, for the longest time back in the day it was Kansas State, for the longest time it was Kansas, although that's another story for today on our show when we look at the Big 12 on who's more fragile, and obviously some teams are red hot. Here's one of the funniest tweets from that game when it was over. Brett Kelman, Vanderbilt is going to party so hard tonight that an entire generation of future doctors will be slightly dumber.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that was did you guys see any of the videos from Broadway in Nashville?
Oh my God, yeah.
It was just
one after another.
I mean, it was like the CMAs were in town. Like, that's what it looks like when there's award shows going on at Bridgestone. It was nuts.
Or a bunch of bachelorette parties.
Well, I mean, there were already those going on. That's look, you could take the music out of it for like 6 months. You know, like if they, you know, like if COVID happened only to musicians, right? It was just a disease that affected pickers and grinners, right? Only that, but they could still do bachelorette parties. Nashville would just be fine.
Absolutely. Craig, do you know who's next on the clock when it comes to who has not beaten the top 10 team the longest stretch or the worst record? Now, Vanderbilt has one.
I have not the slightest clue.
Well, I didn't know. Tulane, 0-39-1. Temple, 0-25. Tulsa, 0-21. And Cincinnati, I thought that run when they made it to the college football
But
playoff.
when they got their shot, Alabama.
Yeah. 0-18.
Yeah.
So now Vanderbilt is no longer on that list. The next one goes down to Tulane at 0-39-1. And then there's Arkansas. And we're going to have a topic about the Big 12, about which team right now, in your opinion, is the most, I guess you could say, red hot, and also which among a group of teams is most fragile. Josh Heupel at Tennessee has done a really nice job. But they have one fart every year on the road. 2022, they lost at South Carolina. 2023, they lost, made no sense, at Florida. And then this past weekend, they lose to Arkansas, a team that was not having a bad record year, but a team and their head coach that needed something good to happen, and they took out the Volunteers.
I think if he gets 2 more wins, because they'd be like that would give him 6. Mm-hmm. If he gets 2 more wins, Sam Pittman's back next year. So if you wanted Sam Pittman gone, you better hope that this is the last win he gets. But most of the time, you don't storm the field and tear down goalposts and then fire a coach.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was absolutely huge for him. I liked some of the moves. They became very Texas-heavy in a good way in the offseason, and I think that's paid some dividends for them. But, Jaquindon Jackson in particular is a guy who I think's had a nice little run there. Andrew Armstrong, the wide receiver. Prior to injury, Taylon Green, obviously a quarterback, even though he's a roller coaster in his own right. But, yeah, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. You're on the hot seat. All you can do is go out there and try to save your job by winning, and he's done that to some extent to lead you to believe that this could be a situation that brings him back ultimately, unlike maybe some others like Dave Aranda who are struggling to find wins while they are on the hot seat. I think Sam Pittman's making a great case to potentially run it back, if he's able to maintain this kind of core that they've got going in a good direction right now. But, that was a stunning win as well. I mean, I guess – I was just talking about the playoff at the start of the show. If you're somebody who's pissed because Tennessee's lost and they're still probably going to make the playoff, the good news is that if you're – okay, I guess you're on the side of things. This isn't like a season ender. Not that one loss necessarily is, especially for an SEC team. But now, you'd be like, oh, my God, we can't lose again. Well, now you can't really lose again, but you can, and you should be fine if you take care of the rest of your business. And you know what? While old me would go like, no, you lost. You don't just – if you're one of the best teams in the country, you're going to have to prove it in this playoff. So I don't really have if it means that Boise State gets a crack at just playing for a national title and Iowa State gets a crack at playing for a national title, then yeah, give me 2-loss Tennessee in the playoff as well, because they're probably still one of the best teams in the country. And I think to sit there and just erase a season because you lost a game is archaic thinking, and especially with the even playing field like we talked about at the very beginning. So that's a tough loss, but Tennessee's going to be fine. They just got to go out and win the majority of the rest of their games, and they'll be in the playoff and be able to flex their muscle again. But yeah, that's a stat that's disconcerting if you're Tennessee fans. It's just this era that doesn't matter as much necessarily.
I think everybody gets a mulligan loss, and especially depending on what conference you're in. Tennessee, Arkansas, by the way, now with 4 wins, they have 4 of their last 6 games against ranked teams. At least teams that are ranked now, we don't know if they're up or down or where they'll be when they play. Tennessee, meanwhile, on their schedule, because of the fact they just lost to a team like Arkansas or what Alabama did. Alabama's got games coming up at the end, but Tennessee still has to play Alabama. So one of those two is going to have 2. They have Georgia, and they have a game at Vanderbilt at the end of the year with a rivalry game, and who knows, or Kentucky. So it's going to be fun. Hunter Yurachek, the AD at Arkansas, after storming the field alongside Arkansas fans. I love Sam Pittman. He gets a lot of crap, but that guy's a hell of a football coach. He needs to get some credit for tonight's win. Are you happy to pay the fine for the field storming? Hell yeah. From Hunter Yurachek.
I didn't realize this until this morning, that you pay the fine, it goes directly to the team you storm the field on.
Yep.
I just thought it went into a pot.
I brought that up earlier because I didn't either.
Yeah, I had no idea.
I didn't either.
So Alabama, even when they lose, and every team in the not every team, but they've gotten the field stormed on them 11 years, 11 losses in a row on the road or whatever it is, or 11 teams have done it. And so because of that, now with the new rules, if you storm the field after you beat Alabama, they're getting $250,000. You're just going to give it right to them. So
you're going to pay the team that you stormed the field against.
Well, and look, Tennessee, did it twice last year. They stormed the field twice and didn't care. Vanderbilt, believe me, trying to find $250,000 or $300,000 at Vanderbilt, not hard.
It's a great story because they are the one that a lot of times we insert in the equation of Well, yeah, but they get to play Vanderbilt. Now not. They don't. They are now a team that is no longer just something you could poop on. They still have to go follow up the rest of the year.
At the same time, there's a guy I used to work with. I'm not going to mention his name because I'm not trying to make it like that, but he is like the biggest SEC homer, and it used to drive me insane because it was just it was so over the top. It's like, dude, it's like, get off your knees, please. Yeah. And I saw this guy turn that Vanderbilt loss they're not in the doghouse anymore, but this just goes to show you week in, week out. It's just come on, man. Yeah, it does, I guess, to some extent, but let's not like Vanderbilt suddenly world beaters because they won this one game. There's still other teams that are down or whatever. Let's not act like 1 through 16 is suddenly a murderer's row because of Vanderbilt. But could it start to be getting in that direction to where the whole top to bottom is the toughest it's ever been? Yeah, it very well could be. I mean, it could be if Vanderbilt's suddenly playing and winning football games and Arkansas is the other team you thought would be down at the bottom and they're beating Tennessee and, all of a sudden you go, damn, maybe this is more of the 1 through 16 that you used to pretend was the reality, but now is actually more of the reality than it was when you used to say that.
I'll have a note on that, too, because they have now more teams in the top 25 in the AP than they had last week, and they had a bunch of those big boys lose, but they were far enough up the ladder where they weren't going to fall out, but somebody else joined the fray, including – go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when you come to Missouri, that's
Fraud.
their first loss, but, they almost lost to Vanderbilt a couple weeks ago.
They might be a top 25 team, but they haven't shown any reason for them to have been 10 or 9.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
A&M had the loss earlier at home to Notre Dame, and you just don't know about them because they can be flaky. But in his first year at A&M, Mike Elko has now started the year 5-1, first time since the COVID year. First 5-game winning streak since 2020. First 3-0 start in the conference since Kevin Sumlin's team in 2016. And the first 28-point victory over a top 15 opponent since a guy named Johnny Manziel was playing for Texas A&M.
Yeah.
That's what's happened. Mike Elko, this doesn't mean A&M's going to run the table, but all of a sudden now they're in that picture where you're like, well, they've been dysfunctional, but maybe they're getting their stuff together.
They got, they didn't maybe get the Texas schedule when it came to the SEC this year, but they certainly did get Florida or Oklahoma's, right? They have a pretty favorable schedule for them down the line to keep in this race for a little bit. If they keep at this pace, they're going to be just fine because one of their biggest obstacles on the schedule outside of Texas was Missouri this year, and they just passed that one with flying colors. And never in the Jimbo era did they beat anybody like that decisively. Ever.
No.
Anybody.
No.
They lost to App State, but they didn't even beat, they sometimes didn't beat Sam Houston that decisively. Yeah. They really crushed them.
Yeah, Missouri, I say fraud because I think that they were. I think that was very much like the conference that you played in was giving you a boost in the rankings because there was no other reason to have them that high. As far if you were going off actual proof in the pudding, that was we think you're pretty good. You have nothing to show for it really, but maybe some of last year we'll just add that into the mix because you haven't done anything all that impressive this year. That is where the rankings are bull and where they get massaged in a way that. Yeah, somehow you get more teams in the top 25, even though, the top teams lost. Well, now they drop a little bit, and the other ones that beat them, they go soaring into the rankings now. So I think that's all.
It's a bubble.
It's all really rigged up. It is. But, I think Missouri's still a good team. I just think that they were laughably overrated, and I wasn't surprised to see A&M beat them. I picked A&M to beat them. I didn't think it would be as lopsided as it was, but credit to Mike Elko, and I like the fact that A&M's just gone about their business and winning games, and we're not hearing all that much about it.
By the way,
it's not a bunch of hype. It's not a bunch of this and that and Kevin Sumlin and helicopters and Johnny Manziel throwing dollars, like it was previously. It's just very workmanlike, and it doesn't have to be that way. But I think A&M's experienced the other side of it and had their fun with that. But then that kind of waned, and they had the whole Jimbo situation, and it's kind of time to get back to work and just be worker bees, and I think that's what they've got going on, and it's effective right now.
All right, you mentioned Texas's schedule. Here's what they now have.
It got harder this week.
Changed. Yeah. Now, again, we don't know because you don't know. You kind of do, but they have the rivalry game with Oklahoma, who has looked just above average. It depends on what you want to look at. What is just above average? They got beaten by Tennessee, remember, at home, a couple of weeks ago. So Oklahoma rivalry game, and I never thought Texas would lose to OU last year. And then Dylan Gabriel and company had a phenomenal game, and Texas could not hold on to the lead. Georgia, night game in Austin Saturday. At Vanderbilt, Florida. At Arkansas, another rivalry game. Kentucky, who can just be a pain in your ass, and then at Texas A&M. So their schedule in the SEC, which initially you're like, oh, they got 3 games they got to get through. A rivalry game with Oklahoma, a rivalry game against A&M. Don't worry about that Arkansas game, Vanderbilt game. At least now that gets your attention. Probably the best thing that could happen for Steve Sarkisian at his football program. And speaking of which, Steve Sarkisian saying that if, in fact, the Oklahoma and Texas game was played today, then Quinn Ewers would start. And that's not breaking news, but at least it's on record now after he's been out for a little bit with Arch Manning having himself a go as the starting quarterback with the University of Texas. That game, 2:30 kickoff. We've seen that as an 11 o'clock game many times when it was on in the Big 12. That's a 2:30 kickoff coming up this Saturday.
What do you think the people of the fair would do if the SEC floated out? Like, what if we did this at night? Would they be like, no, we
can't afford the police officer.
We're gonna block the gates.
Yeah, they'll be just more juiced up at 2:30 than they were already at 11 o'clock. But that's the game, the 2:30 game in the afternoon on Saturday. The 11 o'clock game has prestige at times. The night game on ABC, but this is 2:30 this weekend, Texas and OU. I have let's go to the top 25. All right? Here's the top 25 for this week. Now you had number 1, number 4, and number 9 lose. This is this week. You have 8 teams in the SEC that were ranked in the top 25 last year. I don't see anybody here but maybe Missouri and Oklahoma. They kind of need that. They did win the game at Auburn, which was a great comeback. But Missouri and Oklahoma are a little bit I don't know. We don't know. But they're in the top 25. But now they have one more team in the top 25 after the crazy weekend, and that team is at 15. Jumping from out of the poll, at least in the AP poll, into the top 25, all the way up to number 15. So you have 1, 5, 7, 8, 9, 15, 18, and 21. The AP top 25 poll. Ohio State, Oregon played this week, and that, of course, one of the bangers this week. But how about that game coming up?
How about the Big Ten's got 2, 3, and 4?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nice as well, although 2 and 3, as you mentioned, would be separated. But they got 3 of the top 4, so that's something there. Miami creeping up, giving the ACC a little something that they, otherwise don't have from Florida State this year. No offense, Paul, not taking a shot, but just like that's one of the teams you thought would be up there. So Miami's carrying that torch. Clemson's carrying that torch very well. All the poo-poo about them this offseason, and here they are, and they're playing really well. Cade Klubnik's playing really well. But, yeah, I mean, the thing that jumps out to me is Texas got just, a red carpet to the number 1 spot without any doubts because of all that happened around them without them even having to play. And then, the Big Ten takes over the rest of that top 4. But there's a little sprinkling of, a couple ACC teams and Iowa State trying to move their way into the top 10 as well. BYU right there on the cusp. So it's a nice little mix of teams and not that logjam at the top of just SEC that it felt like it was the first month of the season or so.
And it's not a red carpet that they just were given number 1.
No, but it's like a free walk, though.
Yeah,
like they didn't play and everybody lost.
Yeah, absolutely. After Alabama had jumped them, which now you wonder why. The week before, yes, they had the dramatic win against Georgia. Now, let's look at a couple of more things. This is from Brett Yormark. He spoke with Joseph Duarte of the Big 12 when it comes to the Big 10 and the SEC and the conversation about having even more teams who are automatic bids in the future. Not for this year, won't be for at least another couple of 2 or 3 years, but Brett Yormark did speak with Joseph Duarte about this. You can read all that, or you can also just listen to what I have to say about what he had to say. Can we make sure that people earn it? Don't give anybody a free pass. You know who doesn't get a free pass in the NFL? Everybody. Everybody. Nobody in the NFL gets a free pass. You might say, well, this is not the NFL. It's pretty damn close right now. So nobody gets a free pass. In any professional league, when it gets to the playoff, you have to earn it based on wins and losses. And you don't even have quality wins to get you in the playoffs. In the NFL, you have a record. You have a 11-6, or you're 10-7, or you're 3-14, and you sit home. You have to earn it. And in college football, that's basically what Brett Yormark's trying to say, too.
Okay. Do you guys feel like this whole automatic bids thing is – there's always something like when you come to collective bargaining, which this is, when you're bargaining out, what your thing is going to be. Like in the NFL, Major League Baseball, whenever there's a labor tension, there's like a major issue that the players always give in on because they're like, oh, you can have Sunday, like you can have Wednesdays off now.
Well, you don't have off. You don't have the workouts in the off season.
Yeah. So but then they give up something that's way bigger and more important. I think that this is the SEC and Big Ten's bargaining ploy so that they can keep grifting the money away, going, well, if we back off of this, we still get more money, right? I think if they keep that in the conversation constantly, even though, especially Greg Sankey knows automatic bids means he's going to get less teams in because they're going to have to fill out the other ones before he can do that, and some of his good teams might get left out. But if he keeps floating out there, then the other conference will be like, listen, just please don't shut us out. Take more money.
Yeah, Snakey and Petiti are definitely, flexing their muscle and have been for quite a while now. And I think it's come to a point where everybody has to put their feet in the ground and fight back. I think you've had points where guys have decided it's not worth the fight because we just want inclusion, right? Like we just want to be included. We just need to have our playoff spot. Just, please let us be in the club with you guys. I think at this point you got to say to hell with it. If we set the club on fire, we set it on fire. But we're going to make sure that you're the one that everybody knows is to blame for this all, Greg Snakey, because you are as much as anything else. And the comments last week that he made that went viral probably weren't as egregious as a lot of the reaction to it. Certainly wasn't surprising if you've been following anything that he's said for the most part for the last couple of years. He's worried about the SEC and the SEC alone. As the SEC commissioner, that's all he should be worried about. So I don't blame him for that. But you can't help but see the little fingerprints all over and the sort of usage of their arsenal of power, right, and the consolidation of that and how they've used that to twist everybody else into agreeing to giving them more and more and more. And it's like, all right, when's enough? You've already got all the advantages when it comes to money and TV platform and prestige and rankings and everything else. And now you're going to continue to just want more and more and more. At some point, everybody's got to say no. And you know what? If they say, well, all right, we're leaving, well, then so damn be it. But the whole, we're just going to give everything that they ask for so that they just continue to bring us along with them, I think this is going to take you down the path where you're all just a bunch of Vanderbilts. Yeah, you got not new Vanderbilt, but old Vanderbilt. We're yeah, you've got a shot, but you're already way behind the 8 ball because you've given so much more to them just to be a part of this that you're at an extreme disadvantage just to say that you were a part of the club, so to speak. So screw giving yourself even more disadvantages. I say you push back. You push back on these auto bids. I know Yormark's comments were very much of the effect that this isn't a done deal just yet, that there's still a lot of talk and then a lot of the panicking's premature about the actual format moving forward. I know he's also setting this all up. His strategy has to play into wanting basketball to be something different in the future, so he's got to politic and play his games. But as far as just outside looking in, it's you've given a lot of concessions to the SEC, and there's always this huge threat of, if you don't follow along, they're going to leave you. At some point, you got to call the bluff. And guess what? You're not going to be the bad guy if you do that. No matter what any state media wants to say about it, you're just fighting for yourself. And it's time everybody fights for themselves. And I think that's been the case to some degree. I also think there's been a lot of panic and, oh, my God, we better do what they say or we're kicked out of the club. And I don't know. I think that you got to start fighting back a little bit.
I think you at least have to. You have to at least. You don't be bullied over what really is revenue and ratings and stuff like that. But and last weekend's another reason why automatic bids, whatever. But yeah, I agree with you, Craig, 100%. I think most anyone would. Even SEC fans, I think, want to make sure that they earn it. But to just say, no, you get 4. What if this is the year the SEC really only has 2 top 10 teams?
Or the Big Ten, for that matter. They get to just be on the side and not take any of the shrapnel because Sankey's more out front than Petiti is, but they're doing the same thing.
Yep.
And it's all based on the fact that they're 100 years old or whatever, more than anything else. And I know it's fan base size and all this. It's the metrics that show that they deserve the most. Imagine that they use more often than not. But I think it's about time you stand up for yourself and you push back a little bit, especially on these, we each deserve 4 automatic bids. F you, dude. Like, how about, you earn it on the field. Like, what a novel idea. And if you cave eventually and you give them 3, well, that's still a win. You don't just say, here's 4 just so that you guys remain happy, because then it's going to be 5. And then it's going to be an expanded playoff again, and then they're going to each want 6. And it's never going to stop, because you're never going to stop giving in to what they want under this ominous threat of this, theoretical breakaway. So I think it's about time you turn the tide, fight for yourselves, and don't allow them just a cakewalk to have a potentially average team waltz into the playoffs simply because the brand that they're a part of.
Again, nobody, I agree. The Cowboys don't get an automatic bid to the playoffs because they're the Cowboys. They don't. And if the NFL does it that way, and you say, again, it's not, yes, they are basically all but the NFL. Now, couple of notes from the Big 12 weekend. I put this up in the chat room. We will get to this in the next segment because of the pod that we have. But which teams in the Big 12 are more fragile? Think about this. Which teams, in your opinion, right now are more fragile? Oklahoma State, Baylor, Kansas, or UCF? Who's losing players like they're jumping off the ship right now with the transfer portal? We're starting to see that. Not just the quarterback from UNLV, a lot of other teams are starting to deal with that.
6 players already for UCF, including their kicker, Colton Boomer, who's the latest one. It just makes you wonder what's going on there. Like, what's the deal? Why not stay in? I mean, they've lost 2 games. Like, they're still in this thing. One of the games they lost doesn't even affect the conference at all. Like, losing to Florida only affects their morale.
Yeah,
like,
but their morale
as a fan base, and it seems low right now. So Gus needs a spark. Something's got to happen there.
Yeah, the Colorado
it's
game.
weird.
The Colorado game, I think, broke them mentally. I don't know about all the other stuff, Craig.
I mean, the UCF transfers are unfortunate. Xavier Townsend a part of that as well. But I mean, the answer is Baylor, and it's not even close. Yeah. Like, that's the coach that's going to get fired if things don't turn around. Not Mike Gundy.
I'm sorry, I didn't bring up TCU. Go ahead.
It's Baylor.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, maybe Sonny Dykes does get fired. That would be totally TCU to fire him and not wait 2 extra years to see if he pans out and just go grab G.J. Kinney or Jeff Traylor or whoever the hot name is. Yeah, TCU, it sucks right now for them. They are a mess. The culture doesn't seem like it's in very good shape.
You're right. And one of the things that happened – go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, one of the things that happened is they had a really nice start. The week before, they were down 28-7 at Iowa State and then got blown out. Here is our good friend Chad Settle, Iowa State fan that I met a few years back when I was visiting Ames, Iowa. Here is what they have is, yes, that is a wild hog. They took him off ice at 1 o'clock in the morning, then put him on the heat at 2 o'clock in the morning. Everyone started to get served at 1:30 or 2, and with all the fixins, the tailgate master from Ames, Iowa, Chad Settle, and then also from Iowa. Those are the 2 pictures. Chad, thanks for sending that. This is the best picture in college football yet this year. Jalen Jackson, the running back of the Cyclones. That's not like the angle makes it look different. That's the running back as a part of a running game that punched Baylor in the mouth over and over again. That little guy, among others, just had himself a game against Baylor.
I think he was the guy who frustrated them the most, by far. Like that, like not getting, like every time it looked like they maybe, okay, you've got a 3rd and 7, they're at a spot where they didn't want to throw, they'd hand off to him, he'd get the first down. He was fantastic.
Yeah, he was really good. I mean, that was a good showing for him, and that's cool pictures. Thanks for sending that along. Like, going with our conversation, TCU's in a funk right now, and Oklahoma State's in a funk. We're going to do that
in the pod, but go ahead.
But I'm just saying, like, going back to my answer, Baylor's the clear answer. I don't care how bad TCU's in a funk in Funky Town, or Gundy's losing his grip in Stillwater, or whoever else you want to throw into the mix. You can't throw Houston now. They're loving life. But I think it's clearly Baylor, and Iowa State put it on them this past weekend. It was a fun game in the beginning, at least competitive game in the beginning. Was still a close game at halftime, was a close game early part of the third quarter. And you wondered if Baylor was going to have, that upset trick up their sleeve. But then it all just unraveled in the, guys, early to mid-third quarter. And from that point on, it was more of the same old song from Dave Aranda's Bears of, big, huge mistakes that are massively costly for you, the types of things you can't do on the road to beat a top 15-ish team at their place, especially when they've got an electric atmosphere. They know how to do the whiteouts right. Like, I see a lot of programs. They got, I'm like, where do you, what do your fans listen to during the week that they just showed up in the usual color? Like, everybody else is in white, and, here's this dude in purple, and here's this dude in green. It's like Iowa State, it was, all whiteout. I mean, they did it to what looked like pretty much perfection. There weren't these random, weird pockets of, just people who lost the memo somewhere along the way or whatever.
Or just don't care.
Or just don't care, which that's also have a little fun for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Damn, you need attention that bad. But anyways, that seemed like it was an electric atmosphere. It was a probably more competitive game than a lot of Cyclones fans maybe anticipated, just given kind of the talk around Baylor right now. But ultimately, it was a dominant blowout win. It was the second biggest win in that, albeit quarter of a century long series between these two teams. So college football wise, that's not really anything major, but still 25-ish years of playing each other. That was the second biggest win total, or winning margin, I should say, for Iowa State against Baylor. They pulled away and left no doubts about who the better team was when all was said and done. So they're in a good spot right now. They are right there in the thick of things as far as being in the race for the Big 12 championship. And being 2-0 is a great place to find yourself. So at 5-0 overall, I mean, they're right where you want to be and right where you might find yourselves, building off of to maybe going to win that first 10-game season in school history. They've never won more than 9 games ever, and they are positioned really well to compete for the Big 12, to compete for a playoff spot, to compete for a historical season. Mm-hmm. There's a lot in front of them, and that was a great win for them on Saturday. But, yeah, Baylor is by far the most in the mud because their coach is the one that's on the hottest of all hot seats, and they're the one that can't beat anybody that matters. They beat teams that they're favored to beat, and then anybody in the Big 12, bets are off, probably not going to beat them, especially if they're ranked or any good whatsoever. Yeah, probably not going to win that game. It has been a year and a half of just nothingness.
2 years.
But of nothingness. Yeah. I mean, name the substantial wins. There's not one. There's a come from, there's the close kick against Cincinnati at Cincinnati, which you look back, that wasn't some great Cincinnati team. There was beating UCF in a game you're getting your asses kicked, and you were fortunate to come back. Thank you, Gus. And you won that game. And beyond that, you beat Tarleton. Okay. You paid them to beat them. You beat Air Force. Okay, that was a measure of revenge because they beat you in a bowl game and embarrassed you a couple years ago, but that wasn't the same Air Force team. You also paid them to beat them at home. So outside of the games you paid teams to come to your place to beat them, and even then that didn't work against Texas State last year. You have beaten the 2 newbies a year ago in games that basically came down to the wire, and you've won nothing else. Not a single upset.
You did
not
not
a
bring
big
up,
win.
You did not give him credit for Long Island.
I mentioned the teams you paid to beat.
But
that's all you've done
Yep.
in 2 years. You beat Cincy and UCF by the skin of your teeth, and you beat 3 teams you paid to beat. That's all you've done. You've done nothing.
No,
so you are by far in the bottom spot.
Since the middle of 2022.
Yeah.
Since winning in Lubbock and winning in Oklahoma and Norman, you have won basically nothing. And we'll get back. The Big 12 South pod is next. One note as well about if you get rid of a coach now. Well, you're going to lose the signing class, or you're going to lose. Who cares? I'm sorry. If the coach coming in can't replace who he wants, you think that the bigger schools care about whether you lose a sign? No, they still will end up in the top 10 or 20. I know Baylor normally is not ranked very high, even some of their best teams ever. But you have to make a move. You cannot be held hostage because of a signing class or the transfer portal.
Yeah, I've seen that random conversation. I mean, I don't think you hold anything together just for a signing class because they could all just transfer out after a year. So there's nothing. If this is the old days where you're at least getting them all for
that
4
makes
years,
sense.
sure. But this, you can flip it over in months. So
But
it doesn't
if
matter.
you get the right coach, he can bring in his.
But I also
talent.
don't know what doing it right now does any good for you
Well,
either.
that's
so,
true too. Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah.
I think there's that November 1st window is where you probably need to kind of tell recruits like, okay, this is where we're going.
Yeah.
So make up your mind.
Here's another thing. And Baylor, I've always been told this, has money when they need it. They have plenty of money no matter what we want to hear about the revenue. If they need the money, they'll need it. There's going to be a buyout for Aranda. There might be an expensive buyout for the staff. Maybe the incoming coach wants to keep some of them. That's part of the discussions. And, you're going to have to go to the portal. Well, the GXG's been doing that anyway.
There's also the house settlement.
Yeah, and that's part of a story about that was at least approved from the initial part of it today by the judge, and we'll get into that today a little bit more in a minute.
But I'm just saying that's another $15 million maybe
22.
that you're. Well, if you want to pay
Yeah,
22,
yeah.
it can be. I would say on average though, most teams will probably pay minimum like 15 million, and then some will pay 22 and go maxed out. I don't know what Baylor's plans for that are, but you do take that into account when you're also thinking about buyouts for Aranda or the staff or whoever. But yeah, you don't keep this together the way that it is just for a recruiting class that has the ability to leave whenever they want to. But yeah, I'm very intrigued by what ultimately what they decide to do because I mean the apathy is set in, guys. I mean it's undeniable. It's just there's nothing of substance on the branch anymore. It's the same story, different Saturday basically. And you have no faith they're going to go and beat anybody else remaining on this schedule. Even Houston, Houston beat them last year.
I said this in the pregame. Why can't they go do a Houston like what Houston had done the night before against TCU?